Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of the Payne and Drain Show. I'm your host, Zach Payne. With me, as always, is my co host, Alex Drain, following a rare Lions loss to the Buffalo Bills. And a whole lot more injuries happened in that game as well that we'll have to talk about. But, Alex, how are we feeling?
Not great overall. It was not a very reassuring game. It was their worst individual performance since the Ravens game of last year. The injuries is really the tough part because I think, bad game, get it out of the system. If everyone had ended healthy, then I think you could say, yeah, that wasn't great, but it's okay. Just get on with the season. But some pretty rough ailments occurring in this game that does make the picture look tougher and tougher. On the other hand, referencing a game we will discuss later in the program, if the choice is between having a juggernaut team slowly ripped apart by injuries or having to watch that Chicago Bears team play week after week after week, I will gladly take this picture because watching that Minnesota Chicago game, oh my God. And we are we should always be thankful that we're not in that place because we were for a long time. So important to keep perspective.
Yeah, and with all the injuries to the defense, we've basically been relegated to a version of last year's defense that couldn't do anything anyways, and that Lions team almost made it to the Super Bowl. So it's not like everything is dead in the water, but we'll get into all that. First, we got to stay a little focused with this game, of course, as we get into it. Remember to follow the show on Twitter at Payne and Drain. You can find me at ZachPayne41, Alex at Alex_Drain. So starting with the offense, this was this is a game that very quickly it became evident the Lions were going to have to score a whole bunch of points. They did score a whole bunch of points, but not until they also found themselves in a pretty decent hole early on in the first half, started to crawl back, and then in the second half, by the time they got up and going, the game was pretty much out of reach. And, it boils down to a few things, but we'll start on a positive note. Jared Goff had potentially his best game of the season, at least stats wise. Kind of the inverse of that Houston game where the Lions win despite Goff throwing 5 interceptions. This time they lose despite him throwing for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. But he looked good.
Yeah, I have two quick notes here on the golf topic before we get into the nitty gritty. First of all, I don't know if you looked at the box score. Did you see the run to pass distribution in this game?
It was bad. It was very bad.
It was 61 pass plays to 13 running plays. Goff
I don't
had
know what universe does that happen to the Lions.
It's pretty unusual. Actually, I'm wrong about that. 64 to 13. I excluded the 3 sacks. So there were 59 pass attempts, 2 runs for Goff that were both scrambles, and then 3 sacks for his 13 runs. Really not unusual distribution there. Second of all, I totally agree about how good Goff was, which leads me to revisit a crusade from earlier in the season. I think it was against the Cardinal. I was after the Cardinals game. I'm a fan of PFF's work overall. I've charted games, watched games for a number of years now, and I always compare my charting to what they found. And for the most part, it's usually broad agreement. There's always individual players that it's here and there, but I think in the macro, PFF does a good job. It's a useful resource. Generally speaking, the guys that they say are really good are generally really good. The guys they say are really bad are generally really bad. So I am a fan of what they do, but the one area of disagreement I have found that at this point is making me disregard all of their grading on this topic is quarterbacks, and particularly at the NFL level. I haven't found it as badly at the collegiate level, but the golf grading is just, I don't know what to say about this. In this game, he gets a 62 grade overall and a 60.4 passing grade. By the way, 60 grade is like the baseline. 60
Yeah.
is if you put me on the field for one play and I do nothing of note and then I never play again, I get a 60. That's the you existed threshold. And he got a 60.4. Now here is the important note about this. So Goff's stat line in this game to earn that 60 grade 38 of 59, 494, 8.4 yards an attempt, 5 touchdowns, no picks. Here is a quarterback in this very week that received a better grade on passing than Jared Goff. Brace yourself for impact on this one. This quarterback went 11 of 17 for 122, 6.6 yards an attempt, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and lost his starting job yesterday. Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins got a higher passing grade for those stats than Jared Goff. What are we doing here? What?
That it's comical. It like so by PFF's estimation, Jared Goff nearly 500 yards and 5 passing touchdowns. Meh, meh. Anyone can do that.
It's like I don't even know what to say about this. They chart him for one turnover worthy pass. I don't remember what that was, but sure. He didn't have any other real things that I remember. I don't even. And the craziest part about this is drilling into Goff's performance. This was his best game in a long time, maybe as a Lion in terms of operating outside of the things that were always said that you
Yeah.
needed to do to have him be successful. Like the pass protection was not good in this game. It had moments where it was giving him time, but Ed Oliver was dominant up the middle. There was rush off the corners. There was blitzes that weren't picked up. His touchdown to Tim Patrick, where he steps up, rolls out,
Yeah.
throws on the run. I mean, that's one of his best plays we've seen operating outside of structure. His scramble obviously wouldn't count for the passing grade, but does overall. Picks up a 3rd and 10 by spinning out of a sack and running for a first down. I mean, that if you showed us that play 3 years ago during his first season in Detroit, we would have had a seizure. Like that is just absolutely a tremendous growth in his game on display. The ball he throws to JMO that is dropped wouldn't have counted anyway because of a penalty. That might be his best singular throw as a Lion. I mean, that thing was Josh Allen. That thing was Anthony Richardson. 65 yards in the air, dropped into a tiny window down the field. His touchdown to Amon-Ra that catches and runs with it. I mean, that's an unreal throw over 2 defenders over the middle. The PFF grading, I don't even know what to say. What I will say about it is, at this point, just let toddlers grade the quarterbacks. You'll save a lot on labor costs because I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's like that old let toddlers decide what's a catch and what's not. Like but yeah, like Goff played very well. He also had a very like a near miss on a play that was almost spectacular. At it wouldn't have mattered because end of the game, final drive, where he's like there's a defender coming dead to rights and he does like his best Eli Manning impression and spins out of it, somehow escapes and
Yeah.
flings it downfield, almost gets to Laporta. But yeah, Goff like it was very good in this game. Like the only criticism I have of Jared Goff potentially, it's not even really his fault. It's just the offense took a couple of drives to get up and going. That's really it.
Yeah, yeah, I thought that there was one ball on or the one play on the second drive where they end up punting. Like I thought maybe he holds it too long and takes a sack that was a little questionable, but like again, that was a play where there is pressure right up the middle, and it's just like, could he have gotten it out a second quicker? And even if he does, it was 3rd and 13, so he might have had to throw short of the sticks anyway. Like, yeah, there was 1 or 2 passes he barely misses. Maybe you can say the pass to Amon-Ra on the attempted 2-minute drill at the end of the first half that was so close to being caught and potentially a touchdown. Maybe he should have thrown a better ball, but again, there was pressure. Like there were some things that were missed. I wouldn't have given him a perfect 100, but this was a really, really good game. One of his best games as a Lion, maybe his best game as a Lion. And to give him a grade right around average is beyond bizarre, completely ludicrous, and renders all of the quarterback grading worthless at this point.
And so to continue with that, like we know that the things that Goff usually struggles with is when teams can get pressure rushing for. And now the Bills, despite having being the team that had a normal week, the Lions had more time to prepare. They looked like the team who was rested and had extra time to scheme up stuff for this game. The blitzes that they were sending, they were doing a great job of confusing the offensive line, but they also were just doing a good job of beating the offensive line. Frank Ragnow, uncharacteristically mediocre game from him. Graham Glasgow, man, he is having a bit of a time over at left guard this season. Ed Oliver, and whenever he kicked inside Gregory Rousseau, they just had very, very good games for the Bills.
Yeah, Ragnow description there might be a little generous. It was bad. And Glasgow, not good as well. Zeitler, I thought was okay. The tackles were okay, but a little wobbly. I mean, there was a lot of pressure in this game. And again, Goff wasn't able to have a successful running game to lean on and then have the play action play off of it. I mean, this was a Stafford game, right? Like everything down to the part where Goff became an ordained minister in the Church of Garbage Time Passing Yards, which Matthew Stafford was the supreme leader of. Um, it was very much just a gunslinger. You got to do it because I was talking to people after the game, and there was all the talk about, what happened to the running game, and it just never really got a shot to get going. I mean, the Bills, the first couple drives load up against it. I mean, I think it was the first drive of the game, their first rushing attempt is second down play. Lions come out in their beefy I formation, and the Bills have 9 guys in the box. They've got one safety playing in the parking lot, and everybody else is right there. And the Lions just kind of run into it. They didn't get a ton of push on the ground anyway, but Buffalo was loading up. And once the Lions saw, number one, that they were going to have to work to get the running game going, and number two, that their defense was incapable of getting a stop, they just gave up. And after those first 2 drives, it was apparent that if they did not score a touchdown on every drive the rest of the way, they couldn't win the game. At that point, they just had to pass. And it put a lot on Goff's plate. And the offense did a really good job of hanging in the game and putting up a ton of points. And at the end of the day, yeah, they get the garbage time touchdown, but they gained a lot of yards and scored a lot of points on a defense for a team that wants to win the Super Bowl. So that's a pretty successful day overall. And in most other circumstances, you win the game.
Yeah, and look, the Bills defense, they aren't spectacular, but what they lack in an ability to just outright stop you, they make up for in their borderline cartoony way that they generate turnovers. I think they still lead the league in turnover margin. I believe they've been amazing at forcing them all year. I know that for sure. And to escape with, I think the Amon Ra fumble was the only turnover they had in this game, I believe, right?
Yeah.
The close call with a strip sack that gets recovered by a lineman, but the Lions, just like you saw it every single time a receiver catches it or a running back like runs the ball, the Bills are just going at the football. They are trying to rip that thing out as much as they can. The Amon Ra, the 66-yard touchdown, you have 2 Bills players that are between Amon-Ra and Goff, and he layers it over both of them, and both of them are just eyes on the end zone already. Like they think that they can intercept that and just take off with it. They are a very opportunistic defense, not too dissimilar from what the Lions want to be at their best. It's very it was very impressive to see how well they took care of the ball. The Lions did in this game. Going to the run game, though, obviously that's not going to get any easier with the injury news to David Montgomery, who still hasn't been placed on IR for some reason. But Jameer Gibbs, he had a couple of moments in this game. He had a couple of okay runs. He got in the end zone thanks to Penei Sewell as well. But and I think he had a receiving touchdown as well in there. But he did actually get involved as a receiver, which um, I had a comment a couple of weeks ago now that I was ready for that to happen. They're actually starting to do things with him as a receiver, although in a game like this, it's more out of necessity than scheme.
Yeah, I thought Gibbs had a pretty solid game overall. That's the first touchdown drive, their third drive of the game. I thought he was really good on. He had a nice bounce when there was really nothing given to him, and it picked up a first down. And as you mentioned, involved in the receiving game. And look, the Montgomery injury. sucks, obviously. It sucks for your short yardage, their ability to pick up those extra yards. But this isn't we lost Saquon and now we're on to Kenneth Gainwell. Like it is a situation where okay, we got to lean on Jahmyr Gibbs. Okay, Jahmyr Gibbs is really good, so that's fine. Not the end of the world there. I do want to note the Amon-Ra fumble because this is honestly the only ref talk thing I think in this game that I had. I They probably got it right. This genre of play was really interesting to me just because I tweeted about this and no one got the reference, but there was a game 5 years ago. Ohio State played Clemson in the Fiesta Bowl in the college football playoff semifinals, and there was a very famous play that is it. First of all, my reference to it shows that I'm not followed by any Ohio State fans because they remember this play very well.
Uh,
But there was a pass out to the sideline, and the receiver got spun around, very similar fashion, and then the ball came out, and Ohio State scooped it up and ran it in for a touchdown. The defender who forced the fumble, by the way, was our old friend Jeff Okuda, and I don't remember who ran it in, but they ended up going on replay and saying, no, he didn't have possession, incomplete pass. If you watch those two plays, they're exactly the same. And in this one, they say no, it's a catch and a fumble. So I tend to lean that they got this one right and the Ohio State one wrong. Ohio State fans obviously are 100% sure it was a wrong call, and if they had called it this way, Ohio State almost certainly wins that game. But it's just these ones are so interesting to me because I always find that like watching them at the live speed versus watching them in slow motion makes such a difference because you watch it live and you're like, I don't think he had that. That's an incomplete pass. And then they will, slow it down and it's like, oh, well, he takes a step and then he moves the arm and that's a football move. And these are always such a gray area to me, but I didn't have a major issue with the way it's called. I just have an issue with general inconsistency across levels of football where it always seems like these ones are a little through the looking glass.
Yeah, well, you can thank Des Bryant for the infamous football move
Yeah.
verbiage that we have to use on these. And look, I think you nail it with the looking at it live. You think, oh yeah, like it's like 1 second and then the ball's out. He doesn't complete the process of the catch, and then yeah, it's the slow mo where you actually see what he's trying to do, and that's what the refs see on replay. Obviously, that's why we have video review. It is what it is. Like at the end of the day, you're gonna have turnovers every now and again. It's like it's just a fact of life in the NFL. Like you can't always be perfect. For as good as Amon-Ra was in this game, he had what it's not even really a mistake. He just had one play that got away from him. Bills take it and they obviously capitalize on it, and it has a big impact on the end results of the game. But it's not there's not really anyone to be mad at for that. It's just frustrating. Now, speaking of Amon-Ra, the receivers, Amon-Ra obviously has a great game. Tim Patrick continues to just be as solid a third receiver as you can get. Sam Laporta also got involved as well. JMO, he had the touchdown at the end, but that drop looms a little large. Not that it would have mattered. Bit of a regression from him in this game.
Yeah, that was his worst drop of the season. Thankfully, it didn't matter at all. Laporta's the big note I had in this game. 7 catches, 111 yards. Nice to see him involved. I think that's probably his most yards of the season. Let me check that real quick. But
Yeah,
yeah, it
gotta
was.
be.
Yep, 111 by a significant margin. 66 was his previous high. So that's a positive thing to note. Patrick, yeah, good touchdown. Nice to see from him. Amon-Ra, they really were feeding him. 14 catches on 18 targets was a very, very busy day. Goff was just spreading it around, did everything that you want him to do. Takes the passes that are available to him. We have to, of course, note the Dan Skipper touchdown. He is involved in this game as a receiver. You gotta love him lowering the shoulder there at the goal line. You knew just watching the play, you knew he wanted that contact. He wanted to
Oh
just
yeah.
pop a guy as he powered in. So that was nice to see. Also, on the topic of the receivers, on 4th and 10 near the end of the game, they run a hook and ladder again,
Yep.
and it works perfectly. Honestly, keep running it. I don't
Yeah.
really know how defenses are supposed to defend it, so keep trying it.
Yeah, like the especially with Gibbs being the recipient of it, like when he's going at top speed and you have a defender who all of a sudden has to stop and change direction, you're not catching him. You're not going to catch him. It's a free 10 yards every time, at least. On the skipper TD, it is funny that it has forced people to completely recontextualize Skipper lining out as a wide receiver against the Cowboys. um, Here's a fun stat for you. Dan Skipper and Jared Goff now both have the same amount of receiving touchdowns on the season as Debo Samuel. It's been a rough year for Debo. Obviously, the Lions have been getting involved with the trick plays. It's been fantastic to see. I don't know if this is just like because the offensive linemen are so big. We saw the same thing with Sewell in that aforementioned Cowboys game where he gets the ball in his hands. He's just like, lower the shoulder, lower the shoulder. I'm running through everyone. I think the linemen just recognized like, hey, I am 100 pounds heavier than everyone else on the field. Let's run through someone. And it's awesome.
My favorite thing about the genre of plays is how tiny the football looks when the offensive lineman is holding it. It looks like a mini football, like you play with like a small child, and they always look so uncomfortable holding it, and you always worry, like as we often see where linemen recover fumbles and then it gets ripped out. Like they always just struggle to hang on to it, and you're always kind of bracing for impact. The other trick play that we should note in this game, they do the throwback play with Montgomery over to Goff, then he throws downfield to Amon-Ra. My only note on this one, did you see the pick six in the Indianapolis-Denver game on this exact play?
Shout out and so actually that's I have a funny note on that too. It at the mic'd up that the of the game, Pat Surtain was mic'd up for that game, and before that drive, he goes up to everyone on the defense and he's like, "Watch out for the trick, it's coming. Watch out for the trick play," and it happens. The trick play happens. Nick Benito, who is actually having one of the most underrated seasons in the NFL this year, gets his second touchdown. It was just absolutely hilarious and spectacular to see. As I do like the Broncos quite a bit, so it's nice to see them succeed.
Yeah, that was just a really funny play. Overall on the offense, I don't have a ton of other notes. Like, again, they put up a ton of yards, and normally you'd expect that to be enough to win. 521 yards, 6.8 yards per play. They really ripped it apart, and maybe you can say that their final drive should have gone more quickly.
Eh.
I don't know. It was pretty over at that point, it felt like, but otherwise, yeah, really really nice game from them. The Just a shame that it didn't really matter.
Yeah, and the reason it doesn't matter is on the other side of the ball, where fans have quickly reverted back to hating on Aaron Glenn. And look, there's a pretty decent explanation for why. It's the Lions just did not look ready defensively in this game, even when they had the bodies somewhat available. Despite like they've been decimated, but they got some guys back in this game. They get Reader back, they get McNeil back at the start, they get Pascal back. I believe they got Almuzarike back as well. They had guys there, and the front just got absolutely nothing on that offensive line. No pressure. Couldn't contain Josh Allen in the pocket. And this is also a game where you really miss Alex Anzalone's ability to cover running backs because old friend Ty Johnson, Lions legend, has a career day with over 100 yards receiving. Just bad all around.
Yeah, the first word I have here on my trusty notes for this episode for defense is yikes. That that pretty much sums it up. It was really bad from start to finish. Bad in basically every phase. There's very few players that I think played well at all. Uh, Obviously, so thing to say about Ty Johnson is he was actually a really good draft pick by Bob Quinn for being, I think, like a late sixth rounder.
Yep.
The, of course, note is that he was waived by the team in October of 2020, meaning that they thought he was not good enough to play on the 2020 Detroit Lions, who were not a very good team. So yet another good riddance to the old administration. But that guy, he's made for this game. And then you toss in James Cook, and the Bills might, as a result, have one of the best receiving running back duos in the NFL that can exploit the Lions this way. And my overarching take after rewatching the tape is that Joe Brady is back. Like, it's been a number of years since he was at the helm of the LSU offense, and back then he was the hottest name in football. He was 30 years old. He just coordinated the best offense in NCAA history. Certainly helped that he had Joe Burrow throwing to Jamar Chase and Jamar Jefferson, but or Justin
Yeah.
Jefferson rather. But you know, he's a talented play caller, and then he goes to Carolina. Obviously, it doesn't go for as well for him there. Then he's a quarterbacks coach in Buffalo, but he elevated to OC with the Bills, and I thought he put together a great game plan in this game. Obviously, there's the low-hanging fruit, which is that the Lions play a lot of man coverage, and they have practice squad linebackers, and we have good receiving running backs, so let's just target that. That's pretty self-explanatory. Problematic for Aaron Glenn that there really didn't seem to be anything prepared to deal with that when it was a pretty clear matchup weakness. But there was also a lot of just cool stuff, like in order to exploit it. That fourth down play they run where they get the rub on Ezekiel Turner, it's legal because it's within 1 yard of the line of scrimmage. It's him open, beautiful play. Their route trees were good. I thought the run schemes were really good in terms of the way that they were able to just toy with the Lions' defense, and evidenced by the fact that they had 2 or 3 rushing touchdowns in this game that weren't untouched. Like the Lions just had no idea what was going on, and he just ripped them open. It was a great game plan from him. I think a really poor showing from Glenn, not just in terms of the sort of coaching and trying to scheme around weaknesses, but the defensive front just didn't look, as you mentioned, sort of prepared or ready to play this game. And certainly you can talk about personnel weaknesses, and some guys that have joined the team recently were really bad. I thought Quan Alexander, not good in this game. However, we can put it to some degree at the feet of coaching and preparation because starters that were playing were also bad. I thought Jack Campbell, worst game of the season. I thought Josh Pascal, really bad. Onzarike, not great. DJ Reader, not great. I mean, it was just a pretty across the board poor performance. And they were really just guessing on the quarterback run stuff from the Bills. There's the rushing touchdown for Allen where they've got 8 in the box, and then he runs up the middle, and when he runs up the middle, there's 2 in the box because everyone else just like ran, half of them ran left, half ran right, and it was wide open. And they just looked really confused in this game, and first time really all year we've said that.
Yeah. So first of all, with the Joe Brady stuff, we had a talk last week about how offensive coordinators need to stop whining about this one play that has been taken away from them in the pick play. We should have known that they would have found a way to keep their prized possession available to them. Joe Brady. I mean, was it was just a great play, but that is what happens when you have pure press man coverage and you play that close to the line in a bunch formation. You're gonna, even if they didn't run a pick play, if Dalton Kincaid is running even a 5-10 yard dig route, you're gonna have the same thing because you're gonna have to run underneath 4 players, 2 DBs, 2 receivers to get to the running back that you're covering, and Ty Johnson is fast. So it's just he could have just run a basic wheel route with no rub, and it would have worked perfectly as well. But very good concepts, anyways, from the Bills, taking advantage of the fact that they knew what the Lions were going to come out in. Even when the Lions did come out in zone a couple of times in this game, it didn't matter because Josh Allen would just scramble outside the pocket and wait for the zone to open up or someone to find a soft spot, and he'd hit them there anyways. It was just like this is the frustrating part of this game. Even when the Lions actually played a good down, actually contained everything, or like actually covered well, everything looks bottled up. The Josh Allen effect then comes into play where you can't contain him. And then as soon as he gets outside the pocket, all bets are off. And you can't cover for more than 3, 4, 5 seconds. It's just not going to work. And yeah, like for as good as the safeties have been this year, not the best game from Kirby Joseph. And the Bills got a lot down the field in this game as well. There's that 150-yard, 60-yard pass that was in the air for like 2.5 seconds or something. Just an absolute rocket from Josh Allen, who really cemented his case for MVP in this one.
Feels like he's got it, right? I mean, I know that there's technically a Lamar case, but the closing argument that he's putting together is really good. And honestly, watching this game, if Brady is calling games like this and Joshy's playing like this, I don't know who's beating the Bills. Like when you're getting that level of execution with that level of game planning, it's a pretty difficult combo to stop. Just some great throws in this game. There's the one where Terrion Arnold is beaten by like a step by one of the tight ends, and he just drops it in. It just was really good. And then obviously the ability to just do the sorcery outside the pocket, which is again a question of sort of preparation or planning in this game, where it wasn't clear to me exactly what the Lions were trying to do. There were definitely snaps where it was like, okay, they're trying to mush rush uh, Allen, keep him in the pocket, and they weren't really succeeding at that. And then there were plays where it's like, oh, they're definitely going to get him, and they weren't getting him. And Pascal in particular had 2 or 3 situations where he had a chance to keep Allen in the pocket or make a sack and didn't either time. There's the one where on the first drive where he finds Ty Johnson on 3rd and 5, and they're chasing him to the sideline, and then Pascal like stops running and runs by him, and it just was really poor in a lot of ways from the front, and it gives Allen more time, and he's only going to get more and more dangerous with that extra time. And um, on the topic of coverage, one note I have in this game, I don't think any player in NFL history will ever match Khalil Dorsey's terrible things per play metric of this game. I went back and looked at the charting. He played 2 snaps in this game. Snap number 1, 65-yard completion against him. Snap number 2, catastrophic ankle injury ending his season. That's really hard
Oof.
to beat.
Just oof. That like I thought he had played more than the two. I know the shot to Keon Coleman just a step behind, just couldn't stick with him. But
Well, and
yeah.
and the thing about that is that it's a lot like that 3rd down I referenced where Terrion gets caught watching Arnold. Like if you watch Josh Allen for 1 second, right? You're in man coverage, you're with your guy, turn your head around, look at the quarterback, stop running for just a second. It's over. Like you lose a half step, he will kill you, and he did in both those cases.
So I ironically, because we have been hammering this point home all season about how Terrion doesn't turn his head. This was a good game for him to not turn his head. But like it's just worth clarifying. Like when we say turn the head, it's during the play. You have to turn your head when the receiver is clearly going up for the ball, not in the middle of the play when you're wondering what's going on. Has the play ended yet? You just as long as that receiver is running a route, you have to keep your eyes locked on his chest or his hips to see where he's going. And yeah, that obviously did not happen on this play.
It's just a nightmare to defend all the different things that Allen can do when he's playing like this. It's really tough. And again, Lions really didn't make it all that difficult. Revisiting Jack Campbell, they need more from him, no doubt about it. Like if you are the only healthy linebacker and everyone else is a practice squad guy, you got to be better than that. As you mentioned, Kirby Joseph, I thought the long touchdown run, really bad read on that one. Coverage seemed okay. The
It's
only
just run defense
interesting,
for him.
yeah, the only interesting guy really to me in this game, Kendall Vildor played a lot of snaps. I think he was charted for 40 snaps in this game, especially because of the Davis injury early. Didn't notice him at all. That's
I I
unusual.
I had one play I noticed him, and it was a PBU on a shot to the end zone where I am 90% sure if the number on that jersey is 0, that gets called for defensive pass interference. Because you cannot convince me that that play looked any different than the pass interferences Arnold's been getting dinged for all year. Where Vildor, good coverage, goes up for the ball, is maybe there a little bit early, but swats the ball away harmlessly. And the receiver is trying to make a play on the ball. Hey, I don't want to talk conspiracy, rookie versus someone who's been in the league a little bit longer. I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
Yeah, he was definitely early on that one, but got away from it. But we've seen him get picked on so much this year, then to see him not really at all was just odd. Besides that, Carlton Davis injury really sucked. He
Stinks.
played
Yeah.
12 snaps in this game, then he goes out. Beyond that, I don't have a ton else. It was just terrible all around, and they really had no answers. They provided very little resistance. Bills could basically do whatever they wanted, and ultimately, some of the decision making from Campbell reflected that.
Yeah. And we'll get into the injuries in a little bit, but Carlton Davis, to revisit our old friends at PFF, since week 9 was the number 1 graded corner in the league. Losing that sucks. There's no other way to frame that. It just stinks. So, we'll see if Arnold, Vildor, Mosley, Rakestraw can step up in that absence. A lot is going to be placed on Arnold's shoulders down the stretch here. So we'll see how he does. Sink or swim for the rookie. Moving on from that, we can, well, we'll package special teams and game theory together because of one very interesting moment. Before that, worth noting, Jake Bates, another miss in this game at the end of the first half. Bad miss, should say, from 52, I believe.
Yeah, something like that.
It was he shanked that one.
Yeah, it was bad. It was not even close. He returned the favor to Bass, who
Who
had
had an
missed.
even worse miss. Yeah.
Yeah, on a chip shot. That closing sequence of the half was not the greatest kicking display in the world. That was Bates' only attempt for a field goal. He was perfect on his extra points. Jack Fox punted 3 times, had a couple bombs. Not a lot else to say there, which then leads us to onside kick discussion.
Yeah, that's so for context, the Lions, they were down, was it 10 or 14?
Yeah, they were
Um
down 10, yeah.
with around 12 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. And with the new rules, surprise onside kicks have been exiled for some reason. And now you have to declare them. The Lions declare an onside kick, and it goes about as poorly as it possibly could have, with the Bills returning it down inside the 10-yard line, setting up a very easy score to extend their lead. Now, the execution aside, because obviously it was very bad and they had a much better attempt at the end of the game. Do we agree with the idea of onside kicking in that spot?
I was against it. I tweeted it about it. The reason I was against it is I am against onside kicks. I I you do an onside kick when you have to, but my issue with onside kicks is under their current rules, they're a useless play that never works, and there's no point in trying it. The recovery rate since the rule change in 2018, I think, is around 10%. Last year, I believe it was, I think, 3 out of 50 in the league, something like that. And I would imagine it's probably around 5% now since you did the declare onside kick, because there used to be a handful of recoveries on surprise onside kicks that were more successful than just doing it regularly. So we're talking about a play that is so rarely recovered, such a low recovery rate. If this are the XFL and we're doing the 4th and 15 onside kick thing, yes, I would go for that, no question, because the logic of trying to steal a possession makes sense. You don't got to convince me that Campbell had lost faith in the defense, and that was the right assumption to make. I'm the guy that is always saying let the other team score at the end of games. I never trust my defense about anything, but in this case, I these plays never work, man. Like it's just handing the other team the ball in field goal range, and I would rather hand them the ball not in field goal range, and so and I felt that just in the context of the game, it's unlikely you're getting a prompt stop, but is the chance they get a prompt stop higher than 6%? Probably. It was maybe like 10 or 15, but that's a little bit higher than an onside kick to me. So I just coming off a touchdown, it's a two-score game. There was still a lot of time to play. I just kind of felt like see if your defense can come up with something. They haven't had it much today, but maybe they can, and I'd rather just do that. And the thing I didn't like about it ultimately, honestly, is the fact that he didn't onside it later. Right? That's the retraction and sort of saying it was a mistake. If you're gonna do it, you got to own it. And Dan almost always does, and I just didn't like the sort of Brandon Staley wishy-washy nature of the decision making.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, would the Lions have stopped them? Probably not. Let's be honest. The Bills were kind of doing whatever they wanted to offensively all game, and there was a very low chance that they could have gotten that prompt stop. The the thing is, like the onside kick, if it was a surprise onside, I can get behind that. Not only do you do an onside kick, you don't even do it very effectively. You figure it out at the end of the game when it's like, okay, just kicking it up into this group of on-waiting Bills receivers hoping to catch this is not a very high percentage play. So let's just drill it at the closest guy, have the kicker punter, like have the kicker just run and hit the guy as hard as he can, launch himself at the guy to force the ball loose if he does catch it. And then we'll see what happens. Then it's a fumble scramble drill. Because look, you cannot give receivers or tight ends a clean chance to catch an onside kick. They will catch it. So you have to make it as messy and uncomfortable as possible, whether that's drilling it on the ground and hoping for a weird bounce, whether that's just hoping that you hit someone in the helmet and it'll bounce right back to you. I don't know, but special teams coordinators around the league have got to rethink how they do this play. I talked about this earlier in the season where if you're going to do an onside kick, I'd almost rather kick it as high as you possibly can and 20 yards downfield.
Yeah.
And then it's the old, jackpot alive. Everyone go get it. Like, we'll see what happens. Because it'd probably be it's basically a Hail Mary at that point. Do you feel better about a Hail Mary or a traditional onside kick? Neither, but
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's entirely correct. I think the logic of the onside kicks really does have to change it and just the approach to it. I'm a big fan of the just line drive laser right at someone up front, and if it doesn't hit them, then at least it rolls downfield, and then
yeah.
you don't have the field position issue. So that's how I would do it. But again, for me, it's all about just the rule changes. Like if this is 2013 and onside kick recovery rates are still 15, 20%, then I definitely would have done the onside kick here. But under the way it currently is, and no one has been able to perfect the approach to it, I shy away from it. But certainly that second one they try is a window into a more effective onside kick approach. However, it's on the NFL to fix this. Like this is just a broken play. It needs reform. It needs to be recovery rates need to go back up because it games become more exciting if this is a more viable option, and it was a more viable option not that long ago. So overall, I thought this was a mistake from Campbell, but I understand why people think it wasn't. Whatever. I'm almost always in his camp on these kinds of things. It was something I disagreed with. I also thought timeout usage towards the end of the game was a little sloppy. He didn't use the one and before the 2-minute warning would have saved them more time. So was not Dan's crispest game and kind of just fits in the theme of the whole day as being off.
Well, okay, this is the tricky part about the end of the game. Is the logic is you want to get the ball back and score
Yep.
quickly and keep all three timeouts
Three
so
timeout,
that
yeah.
Now, the problem was that the offense could not quickly score, and they ended up wasting all the time anyways and having to use a timeout. But if you like, in theory, if you get down and you score with a minute to go and you have all three timeouts, Bills run twice, maybe try to pass it for the first down. You, if you stop them, you would have 40 seconds to then try to dink and dunk your way down the field before setting up a 20 to 30-yard Hail Mary at the end of the game. I see the logic. It just the execution wasn't there. Which I mean, it's not really anyone's fault. The Bills were very content to just play very aggressive prevent and let the Lions take the middle of the field, chew up yards in exchange for time. We see the Lions do that all the time when they blow teams out of the water, and they're just really wanting to end the game where you trade yards and the end points for the time wasted. So, is what it is. Aside from that, do we have any other notes on this game?
They went for it on a 4th and 4 from the plus 46 in the second quarter, down 21-7. I think there's really no question that you go
Yeah,
for that,
you have to.
given the state of the game. So, look, at the end of the day, it's a bad showing, bad game. You were bound to have an off game eventually. And like I said at the top, if there weren't the injury things attached to it, I would be like, wash your hands. I think Buffalo is the hardest team in the NFL to defend, maybe Baltimore, but not our problem until the Super Bowl. And if we have to tangle with these guys again, I will gladly do it in New Orleans. But the narrative coming out of the game, obviously, a little bit grimmer because of injury discussion.
Yeah, and for all the sports betting folks at home, the Lions to lose plus Packers and Vikings to both win was the most free parlay I've ever made in my life. That was the easiest bet I've ever made. But yeah, the injuries are the story. So obviously, Aleem McNeil torn ACL, I believe. Uh, he's
Something like that.
So not only will he miss the rest of the season, he will miss the start of next season. You probably don't see him until late October, early November next year, which really sucks because he is such an instrumental piece of this defensive line. Carlton Davis, he's going to be out 6 weeks. He can return in the NFC Championship game if the Lions get there. Well, he could presumably return. Then Khalil Dorsey, very similar injury to Aiden Hutchinson. He's going to be out for the year, as it happened later in the year than Hutchinson, who hopes to return for the Super Bowl. And David Montgomery, we were told it's a torn MCL, but then they didn't place him on IR, and he told reporters, "We'll see." So, a little confusing what's going on there, but we're just gonna assume that he's done for the year because unless there's some voodoo magic stuff going there, he's done. It
Yeah.
sucks.
So we have some breaking news as we're recording on Wednesday afternoon. Dan Campbell said that David Montgomery is getting a third opinion on his knee, and that is why he is not on IR yet. So I don't know. We'll see what happens on that one. I will continue to defer to the main thought that he is out for the season. He was playing with everyone's hearts. If you saw that on social media the other day, where he posted the image of Sonic and Knuckles crying from the new movie. um, so that one's bad. We thankfully like Jahmyr Gibbs a lot. I assume now it's Craig Reynolds' time, maybe Sione
Yep.
Vaki time. So
Yeah.
we've seen some moments from those guys that are pretty positive. We'll see if they can keep it going. I'm less concerned about that. The McNeil one is really tough. No two ways about that. And this is where you would really like Mekhi Wingo to still be around as well, to be able to chip in on passing downs. I think with Reader and their general, if they get Anzalone back for the playoffs, I think they can survive on the ground. But again, it's just like, uh, how are we rushing the quarterback with these amount of issues? And so that's where it kind of is going to come down to, as you mentioned earlier, where it's a bit of a return to last season with Aaron Glenn's approach, where I think they are going to have to roll the dice more, be more reckless, dial up some more of those crazy blitzes. If you give up the explosive play, you give it up, but on the hope that you get one or two interceptions that really flipped the game. That was how they won a number of games down the stretch last year. It's not what you want to do, but it's what you probably have to do.
Yeah, so first of all, for the defensive line, Levi Onwuzurike, if there was ever a time for you to play your best football, now is that time. For the linebacker situation, you really need Anzalone back, but you know that he's not going to be back till week 18. So you also really hope Melifonwu can come back and do something of note because he would be an immediate upgrade over Quan Alexander and Jamal Adams. So please, that would just be someone that can come down in the box, blitz. Like we know that Melifonwu is a good blitzer, so just something. The saving grace here. Last year, you get towards the end of the season, the playoffs, and you know that above all else, your corners cannot cover. Your safeties are playing okay, but Kerber Joseph was not having that good of a year last year. So your saving grace this year is okay. Terrion Arnold is a good cover corner. He doesn't get interceptions, but he is good in coverage. Kerber Joseph had a breakout year. He's in the midst of a breakout season, possibly a Pro Bowl season. He is one of the best ball hawks in the entire league. Brian Branch, moving back to safety, is great. Vildor, eh, we'll see. But look, you have these guys, just blitz, cover zero, don't care, make them throw it up, and just hope that Kirby is the one who comes down with it at the end of the day. Because you're not going to be able to cover for more than 3 seconds. So don't ask your corners to cover for more than 3 seconds. Make it to where the ball is coming out quick, and they either are there or they're not.
Yeah, I on the topic of other news, and as you mentioned there, Dan Campbell said today that the practice clock has started on Melifonwu, so he could come back in theory this week. We'll see what that happens. I am going to generally assume that he will slip on a banana peel in the parking lot or whatever and injure himself before that happens. But if he does come back, it prevents the possibility to, and I don't know what you think about this, but would you consider playing him at strong safety, move Branch to nickel, and move Robertson to outside corner for Davis? Because that he did play a fair bit of that in Vegas last year.
In your nickel sets, sure. In your base, like if your base, well, I guess their base is nickel, but theoretically, you could run nickel with Melifonwu at strong safety, Branch at the nickel, and then you can also have your more of a 4-2 look where you also just have three safeties on the field and bring Melifonwu down as a linebacker, have two corners, Melifonwu as your de facto third DB down there, and then like Branch and Melifonwu I think are going to like be interchangeable a lot because if we recall, Fatu Melifonwu was drafted as a corner, so he is capable of covering, and he's also pretty good in man coverage, which is what he was drafted on. So tall, lanky guy. He can cover tight ends. You'll bring him down in the box. He'll help the run defense. Branch, we are going to see more Branch in man coverage, I should say. There's going to be a lot of single high Kirby Joseph, I think, down the stretch.
Yeah, I think it'll be out of necessity. The Davis injury, honestly, is kind of, I would say that it was probably, at least to me, a worse injury than the McNeil one. I know McNeil one's worse just because it's long term and blah, 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 but Davis is just so important. You have to just desperately hope that he is able to return for the NFC Championship game if you get to that point, because I think he would be necessary to defeat Philadelphia if we're, going down that road. I think in a perfect world, Minnesota loses one of their next two games against either Seattle or Green Bay. You win your next two, and you get things, kind of wrapped up, and then you're able to manage around it a little bit. That's the ideal path, but it is just getting harder and harder each week. Not impossible. They continue to have a really, really good offense, and we saw that this weekend. And if your defense does just enough and you do end up winning the division, and then perhaps you can get the number one seed, maybe two seed,
Ugh.
have to win some home games. and then you play with the crowd behind you. Then maybe you play in the NFC Championship game, get Davis back. That's the path you're charting out. It's tougher, and if they are unable to pull it off, we'll basically know why. But Dan Campbell's not going to let them believe that. He is the master motivator in these situations. He's going to instill the right belief, and we'll see if they can pull it off.
Yeah. So, I mean, the one seed sounds nice. Don't know if we'll get there, but
We are huge Washington Commanders fans this weekend.
yep. And because the Steelers are useless, so if the Commanders win, though, not only would the Lions then have, if they are able to take care of business against the Bears, they'd have a game on the Eagles, but they'd also have the tiebreaker because the conference
Yep.
record is the tiebreaker there. So go Commanders. It is funny though, there's a very real possibility if the Eagles, they take care of business down the stretch, they lock up the one seed. If the Lions were to lose again, Lions could be staring at the Commanders in the wild card round. That's a very real possibility for that matchup since the Rams have now taken over the division lead and Seattle, we'll talk about in a second. Please help us. But to transition away from the Lions now, we will get into the weekly recap. Man, I don't think there's any competition that the Lions and Packers was the best Thursday night game of the season. Woof. What a terrible, terrible game between the Rams and Niners.
Yeah, the rain was definitely a story in that game. Very just cold and nasty. Neither team's offense could really get going. Total yardage 302 to 191. Rams do outgain San Francisco. They deserve to win. Brock Purdy played very poorly. Was not a good showing from him. 14 of 31. Had a bad interception in the end zone on a ball that didn't need to be thrown. Also took 3 sacks. The drop off to me watching that game from McCaffrey and Mason to Garendo was extremely noticeable. And the general Niners vibes right now are, shall we say, 2023 Eagles vibes. They won't get into the playoffs, but this team just looks like they have given up. There's a weird situation on defense where a linebacker decides he doesn't want to play anymore, and then after the game, the other guy is like, "Well, he's probably getting cut," and like, why would you say that? Very strange thing to say in a post game thing
Well,
about a teammate.
was it even the most? Did you see the George Kittle one?
I don't think so. No.
So Kittle comes out and he's like, I've never seen that before, and I never want to see that again. I hope that guy is not around us anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with this team. The injuries have set in, and they have just decided that the season is over. Obviously, they're 6-8, like it's a long shot, but that was just a really dismal effort from them, and we'll see them in a couple weeks. As for the Rams, they now look like the favorites in this division. They have the lead at the moment at 8-6, tied with Seattle, but they have a small edge and a tiebreaker. They played the Jets this week. Got to win that one. And then they close with Cardinals and Seahawks at home. Like it to me, this is on the Rams' plate now. They should be able to, or they certainly have the opportunity to get this one done. Not a sure thing, but it may end up coming down to that final game against Seattle where they have it at home.
Yeah, well, the Cardinals are the most bipolar team in the entire league. The Rams have to make up the 41-10 loss at the hands of Arizona that they took in week 2, back when the Lions hangover was at its peak. That look, I want to say Rams have this because they probably do, but Seattle also has, I don't know. Well, it kind of depends on the status of Geno Smith, but despite a bad showing on Sunday night, the Seahawks are still very real contenders for that division. But good for the Rams with all the injuries they had early on to work their way back into this mix. Very good and impressive by them.
Yeah, as we mentioned last week, they're a dangerous team. They get into the playoffs. Not one that wildcard teams would want to see. They beat the Vikings earlier this year, and they were in a competitive game with the Packers. So if they win that division, certainly makes a pretty interesting round one.
Now, this was one of the weirder endings of the week. The Commanders and Saints, nearly the most egregious ref mistake of the entire season, where the Saints are down 20-13. It's the end of the game. They have no timeouts. There's 12 seconds left in the game. They complete a pass inbounds. For no reason at all, with 9 seconds on the clock stops running for 3 seconds or so. Then the clock resumes. They're able to spike it with 2 seconds remaining. And they then score a touchdown to make it 20-19. They go for two and don't get it. So, granted, the Commanders deserve flack for letting the Saints in that game. Because how are you letting Spencer Rattler into an NFL football game and almost losing to him? But that, like, I can't even, like, it's so unbelievable how egregious of a gaffe this would have been by the officials that would have cost almost the Commanders a game when, like, that can't happen. That can't happen.
Yeah, so the thing about this one that I thought was interesting is I watched the play and we were talking about the clock stopping, and I'm like, so why did that happen? And I was assuming it is what we see quite a bit in various football leagues where the clock just erroneously stops because the timekeeper is a doofus and has no sense of the game. And like, there's a lot of times that the referees are constantly having to tell the timekeeper, right? Like, please reset it to this time because they just, for some reason, aren't watching the game or they don't know how to operate the clock. This was on the referees. This is the line. The lines judge at the bottom of the screen comes in and signals to stop the clock. And I have no idea why that is. And then it restarted. So that was a strange play. Even stranger is the Saints basically run the same play for their 2-point play that they did to get the touchdown. And it's also the worst 2-point play in football, the rollout to the boundary
Death,
with the
death
like
to the
little
designed
out route in
rollouts.
the
Yeah.
in the end zone. It never works. And they got a version of it to work on the previous play. No idea why they went back to it. Washington is let off the hook. They're probably in the playoffs now. They have a game up on Seattle, who is the first wild card out, but they have a big edge in the tiebreaker in the conference record. So they're probably in good shape. Obviously, if they can take care of business this week against the Eagles, which doesn't sound easy. On the other hand, hey, Eagles have won, what, 10 in a row, something like that. They're
They
due
do.
for they're due. So, and it's in Washington, so go get it done, Jaden Daniels. Punch your ticket to the playoffs. We will thank you for your service if you do that. Otherwise, I don't have a lot else to say about this game other than Commanders haven't looked great down the stretch, but still a successful year for them.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, Daniels is going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, so good for him. And we'll see if they can upset someone in the playoffs. Now, on Sunday Night Football, um, while we were cheering for Seattle, got no help from them as the Packers demolished the Seahawks. Geno Smith picks up a knee injury, and yeah, not good. Packers. I don't know if you saw the stat. Jordan Love during Toyotathon, unbelievable quarterback.
I did see that one. My only note on this game is how funny it was when Sam Howell came into the game because, yeah, the Seahawks don't have a great offensive line, but if you thought his sack problems last year were purely Washington related, this game was a good reminder that they are not because, oh my God, every single drop back is running into sacks, holding it too long, just freaking out. I don't know how that guy uh, did as well, with an asterisk as he did last year for Washington, because that was brutal.
Yeah, and so obviously the Seahawks they play the Vikings this week, so it is big Seahawks fans this weekend. Geno Smith, no structural damage to the knee, and that they're optimistic that he can play this week against the Vikings, which
They need it.
please, please, not only do they need it, we need it because
Yeah,
we all season we have talked about how to beat the Vikings, you need a veteran QB that
yeah.
can sort through all the. Gino is that. You need a veteran QB who has been around the block, who has seen some of these schemes, and can kind of sort through all the disguises that the Vikings do. If Gino plays, the Seahawks actually have a decent chance of. Well, they have a good chance of putting up a fight, a decent chance of winning. Now, obviously, the Vikings are going to be heavily favored for good reason, and I don't know how much I trust Seattle's defense to stop the Vikings' offense, considering everyone seems to forget how to stand on 2 feet when they cover Justin Jefferson. Um, but look, we'll just have to wait and see. Speaking of those Vikings, get Chicago out of every primetime slot for the rest of time, please. They take care of business against the Bears. Not to anyone's surprise, they had to make up for it being too close of a game in Chicago. But yeah, just bad.
Yeah, that's the Bears had opportunities to get into this game because again, as we've seen at times with Vikings this year, where they win a game really solidly and total yardage, on the other hand, looks pretty even. In this game, they outgained Chicago 329 to 284. It shouldn't have been as lopsided of a game as it was, but just the sequence of events we've seen all year, where the Bears they they turn it over on downs on their very first drive in their own territory. Then they fumble the ball on their second drive. Then they punt. Then their third drive, now they're down 10-0. They drive into Vikings territory and they get backed up. They have a shot, 4th and 1, stuffed again. It just kept happening to these guys. And then they have a sequence at the goal line in the second half where they score a touchdown, and the offensive lineman they lined up at fullback didn't report as eligible. This was not a Monday Night Football hoax like we saw last year. This was a legitimate error by the team. So it takes the touchdown off the board, backs them up. Then they get down to the 1 yard line again. Then a holding penalty on an offensive lineman backs them up. And Troy Aikman in the booth is just inconsolable. I mean, he is just disgusted at what he's witnessing, as we all were. And it just, this is my point at the top of the show. It's just watching this team is so painful because there's just incompetence on every play, on every drive. They just cannot get out of their own way. And, we thought maybe it could get better firing Matt Eberflus, and it has not.
Well, having an interim offensive, like a promoted offensive coordinator, then have to be the interim head coach. Maybe not a recipe for success. I just found this, and this is just borderline not even borderline. This is unacceptable. The Chicago Bears in this game 1 for 12 on third down. 1 for 12, and then 1 for 3 on fourth downs. What? That. Oh my goodness, man.
Caleb
And
Williams was really bad in this game too. We should point that out. Like his stats weren't
well,
horrible, they weren't good, but just watching it visually, he missed some really easy throws, looked so uncomfortable in the pocket.
so Chicago fans that are big Caleb stans are now finding new ways to cope as they have to. So now we have reversed the storyline coming into the season and at the end of last season. This is the best situation a number one pick has ever walked into. No one has ever had these kind of weapon. Yeah, now this is the worst wide receiver room in the league.
I
That's
saw
the
that tweet.
like we have just completely like Keenan Allen. Is he peak Keenan Allen? No. Is he still good? Yes. He is still a very savvy route runner, good veteran. DJ Moore, very solid wide receiver one. Is he a truly elite wide receiver one? No, but he's still a very good one. The big problem is Romo Dunze has not had that good of a rookie season, which, you would hope to out of a top 10 pick is what it is, but you hope he develops. Well, Bears fans hope he develops. DeAndre Swift, I don't know if Chicago fans just weren't paying attention, but Detroit fans, we warned you. We warned you what DeAndre Swift is and what he isn't, and what he isn't is someone who can create more yards than are available to him. He is only as good as his offensive line, which is not really a fault of his. A lot of running backs are like that, and Cole Kmet, fine tight end, but yeah, Chicago fans, they found out just the quality of the people around them, but Caleb has not elevated any of the weapons at all.
No, I mean it just not where you want him to be at the end of the rookie year, but obviously a lot will rest on who the next hire is and what they're able to do with it. The Odunze thing is a bit of an elephant in the room. They need to also hire someone to get him on track. But there are certainly players here, and their offensive line, as we've talked about in the past, is not great, but it's also not as bad as it appears when Fields and Williams are playing because of the manner in which the way they play brings pressure on and leads to sacks because they hold the ball so long. There is enough here for a quarterback to be successful, and it's not happening at the moment. And this is a team that I believe has now lost 8 straight after being 4-2 at the bye week. It really just feels like that sequence of games from the Commanders' Hail Mary to the Packers' blocked field goal to the Vikings' OT fiasco to the ending of the events on Thanksgiving against the Lions. They were really competitive in those games, and then the last 2 weeks since then have just been horrendous. And there's a part of me that is concerned about this upcoming game just because it's like, man, they're due to get a win at some point. On the other hand, it just kind of has looked like those games going against them just broke their spirit, and they are now already packing their suitcase for the off season.
They still have not recovered from the Commanders' Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Like that play genuinely, I've never seen one play break a team like this. And, like in saying that the Bears will probably win this week just because we've been slandering them so much, but look, the Lions defense being so beaten up and having such troubles with generating pressure actually makes it a really good matchup for the Bears offense because Caleb will be able to hold the ball as long as he wants and try his best to distribute it. So yeah, we'll see what happens, man. Like it's in Chicago. I don't know what the weather's gonna be like, but can't imagine it'll be warm.
Yeah, I mean, it we'll get to test the old Jared Goff cold weather talking points because we haven't really gotten that this year. The Green Bay game was chilly, but not outright frigid. The projected weather in Chicago. Let me pull up the forecast.
It's
See, it's
gonna be
supposed to be.
like 27 to 30
Yeah,
Fahrenheit.
it's. I mean, it's really cold here this coming weekend. Sunday, 30-degree high, 20-degree low. Being Chicago, there will be a lot of wind off the lake, so yeah, it'll be cold. But
That's what the weather's like in Calgary right now. So like,
I mean, at the same time, like Caleb Williams isn't exactly like a objective cold weather warrior. I mean, he was from
true.
DC, which is chilly, but he played in Oklahoma and Los Angeles in college, which are not exactly the peak cold weather places. And the Bears don't have much of a running game, and they threw the ball really well against the Lions the second half of Thanksgiving. So if this somehow turned into a really cold weather ground and pound game, I would like the Lions a lot more than the Bears in that situation.
Yeah, so you hope that the Lions offense gets it done. You just really cannot afford Goff to fall into the like playing bad against good linebackers trap again. Like
Yeah.
as long as Goff takes care of the ball and doesn't make any egregious errors, the Lions should be fine. The Lions are the far better team, even with all the injuries. They just have to take care of business. You hope that, well, you expect that this coaching staff can get the team refocused and kind of in alignment on what they need to do. So we'll see what happens. Do you have any other thoughts before we wrap up the show?
Not really the same thing I thought going into that Thanksgiving game where I was a little on edge, which is that, yeah, I'm not feeling incredible about the situation in you're on alarm going into a game like this. That said, saving grace, you can generally bank on the Bears to blow it. And that it came through for us last time, and if necessary, hopefully it will again.
Yeah. So that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening if you're on podcasting platforms or watching if you're on YouTube. Make sure you follow the show or like and subscribe. You can follow the show at Payne and Drain on Twitter. You can find me at ZachPayne41, Alex at Alex_Drain. We'll see you guys next week as the Christmas holidays are rapidly approaching, and hopefully the Lions can take care of business. We'll see you guys next week. Cheers, everyone.